The most dangerous lies are not the ones people tell out loud. They are the ones people believe before the truth ever has a chance to speak. The departure hall of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport was alive with the familiar rhythm of rolling suitcases, overhead boarding announcements, and travelers rushing toward departure gates beneath towering walls of glass that reflected the early morning sunlight. Business professionals balanced coffee cups and laptop bags while military families embraced near-security checkpoints, and airport employees guided passengers through orderly lines with practiced efficiency. Hidden above every entrance, every corridor, and every screening area, dozens of security cameras quietly recorded every movement without emotion, without assumption, and without taking sides. Officer Daniel Brooks had spent nearly 10 years assigned to airport security, and experience had taught him that crowded transportation hubs demanded constant awareness. Every unusual movement deserved attention. Every unanswered question required verification. His responsibility was to notice details that everyone else ignored. As another wave of passengers entered the main security area, his attention settled on a well-dressed man carrying a worn leather briefcase and a single garment bag instead of heavy luggage. The traveler moved calmly through the terminal, occasionally stopping to help another passenger find the correct airline counter before continuing toward the security checkpoint with unhurried confidence. That traveler was Marcus Ellison, a federal judge traveling to Washington for official judicial business. His tailored navy suit was simple, his shoes showed the subtle wear of frequent travel, and nothing about his appearance suggested the position he held. He preferred it that way. Throughout his career, he had believed that respect earned through conduct always carried more weight than recognition attached to a title. He never introduced himself by his office unless it became absolutely necessary. As Marcus approached the screening area, Officer Brooks stepped forward with a professional expression and politely asked him to pause for an additional verification. Marcus immediately stopped, offered a courteous nod, and answered, "Of course, officer. Please let me know what you need." Several nearby travelers slowed slightly, assuming the interaction was simply another routine airport security procedure. A television crew preparing a travel segment continued recording general footage of the busy terminal, while airport security cameras silently captured the entire checkpoint from multiple angles. Officer Brooks examined Marcus's identification carefully before asking several routine questions about his travel itinerary. Marcus answered each one clearly, calmly, and without impatience. Even so, something about the situation caused the conversation to continue longer than either man expected. Brooks requested another layer of verification through airport procedures, believing it was appropriate to resolve every remaining question before allowing any traveler to proceed. Marcus remained composed, resting one hand lightly on the handle of his briefcase while quietly waiting for the next instruction. He never mentioned his position. He never suggested that the rules should change for him. He simply respected the process because he believed institutions remained strongest when everyone followed the same procedures with fairness and professionalism. Around them, boarding announcements echoed across the terminal. Children laughed beside oversized suitcases, and passengers hurried toward departure gates without realizing that an ordinary conversation near the checkpoint would soon become the most important event recorded inside the terminal that morning. Unknown to nearly everyone nearby, airport operations had already received notification that a federal judicial escort would be meeting an arriving dignitary before departure. Staff members assumed the judge had already cleared security. They did not yet realize he was still standing at the checkpoint only a few hundred feet away. Officer Brooks thanked Marcus again for his patience before waiting for updated information from airport operations. Marcus responded with the same calm smile he had carried since the conversation began. "Doing the right thing sometimes takes a little longer," he said quietly. Neither man understood that every word, every gesture, and every passing second was already preserved by the airport surveillance system, waiting silently for the moment when the complete story would finally be seen. 1 hour before the quiet conversation at the security checkpoint began, Marcus Ellison stepped out of a downtown Washington hotel into the cool morning air with nothing more than a weathered leather briefcase, a garment bag resting over one shoulder, and a travel coffee in his hand. The city had only begun to wake as commuters filled sidewalks and taxis moved steadily toward the airport. Marcus preferred arriving early for every flight, because years on the federal bench had taught him that rushing often led to unnecessary mistakes. Time, patience, and preparation were habits that shaped both his courtroom and his daily life. As his driver pulled into the departure lane at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, Marcus thanked him warmly before insisting on carrying his own bags. The driver offered assistance, but Marcus simply smiled and replied, "You have already done enough this morning." Inside the terminal, thousands of travelers moved through the building with familiar purpose. Business executives hurried toward airline lounges while families organized passports, boarding passes, and backpacks before joining security lines. Airport employees answered questions with practiced efficiency, and overhead announcements echoed beneath high glass ceilings. Marcus paused near an information kiosk after noticing a young family studying a terminal map with growing confusion. Their connecting flight had been moved to another concourse, and they appeared worried about reaching the gate before boarding closed. Marcus quietly walked over and asked whether they needed directions. After listening carefully, he explained the quickest route through the airport, pointed toward the correct shuttle connection, and even walked with them for several minutes until they reached the proper corridor. The grateful parents thanked him repeatedly, but Marcus only wished them a safe trip before continuing toward his own checkpoint. He never mentioned that he had an important schedule waiting for him in another city. Helping someone else had simply mattered more than arriving a few minutes earlier. Along the way, he stopped at a small coffee stand where the cashier accidentally charged him twice because of a register error. Instead of expressing frustration, Marcus politely pointed out the mistake, waited patiently while it was corrected, and thanked the employee for taking the time to fix it. The young cashier smiled with visible relief after the transaction was completed. "Thank you for being so understanding," she said. Marcus answered gently, "Everyone deserves a little patience on a busy morning." Those simple words stayed with the cashier long after he disappeared into the crowd. Unknown to nearly everyone around him, Marcus was traveling to attend a judicial conference involving federal court administration and constitutional issues. His schedule had been coordinated with airport operations because a federal marshal would briefly meet him before departure to review updated travel arrangements. Even so, Marcus had specifically requested that no public announcement or special escort accompany his arrival through the terminal unless absolutely necessary. He believed public confidence in the justice system depended upon humility as much as authority. Titles belonged in official proceedings, not in ordinary moments of daily life. While Marcus calmly approached the main security area, airport operations reviewed the morning arrival list for several visiting government officials expected to travel through the terminal. One name remained highlighted because a federal marshal had requested confirmation as soon as the judge entered the secure area. Staff assumed the confirmation would happen automatically within minutes. They had no reason to expect any delay. At nearly the same time, Officer Daniel Brooks completed a routine briefing reminding airport security personnel to remain attentive throughout the busy travel period. Recent incidents involving fraudulent credentials and unauthorized access attempts had reinforced the importance of careful verification whenever questions arose. Brooks took the reminder seriously because he believed consistent procedures protected every traveler equally. As he moved into position near the checkpoint, he scanned the growing line of passengers with quiet concentration. Moments later, Marcus Ellison entered the screening area with the same calm confidence that had guided every step of his morning, unaware that an ordinary security procedure was about to become the beginning of a lesson neither man would ever forget. The conversation at the security checkpoint continued with the quiet professionalism expected inside one of the nation's busiest airports. Yet the atmosphere gradually shifted as each passing minute attracted more curious attention from travelers waiting in nearby lines. Officer Daniel Brooks remained focused on the verification process in front of him. Nothing about his posture suggested anger or impatience. Instead, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed that careful procedures protected both the public and the integrity of airport security. Marcus Ellison responded to every question with calm precision, maintaining steady eye contact and offering complete cooperation without the slightest sign of irritation. He placed his briefcase on the inspection table when requested, opened every compartment without hesitation, and answered questions about his destination, his itinerary, and the purpose of his travel. His voice never rose. His expression never changed. To many observers, he appeared to be the most patient traveler in the entire terminal. Even so, the extended conversation began drawing quiet whispers from passengers waiting nearby. A businessman glanced at his watch before looking back toward the checkpoint. An elderly couple exchanged uncertain looks while wondering why the inspection seemed to be taking longer than usual. A young college student casually lifted a cellular telephone, assuming the unusual delay might become another ordinary airport story shared on social media. None of them understood the full circumstances, and none of them realized that the airport surveillance system was documenting every second from multiple angles with perfect clarity. Officer Brooks requested another identification check through airport communication channels after noticing a small discrepancy involving the timing of Marcus's scheduled departure information. It was not evidence of wrongdoing, but Brooks believed the inconsistency deserved clarification before allowing the traveler to continue. Marcus nodded respectfully and replied, "Please take whatever time you need. I would rather see the process completed correctly than hurried." The answer surprised Brooks for a brief moment. Many travelers complained when delayed by only a few minutes. This man remained completely composed despite standing still while the line continued moving around him. Brooks thanked him for his cooperation before contacting airport operations for additional confirmation. Meanwhile, several floors above the terminal, an airport operations coordinator reviewed the morning schedule once again. A notification from the Office of the United States Marshal Service remained active on the computer screen, requesting immediate confirmation once Federal Judge Marcus Ellison entered the secure departure area. The coordinator expected that confirmation to arrive automatically through routine procedures. When no notification appeared, she checked the system a second time before calling the airport security supervisor. "We have not received confirmation that Judge Ellison has cleared screening," she explained. "Can someone verify his location?" The security supervisor, Emily Carter, immediately contacted personnel assigned to the checkpoint without yet understanding why the expected confirmation had not been received. At nearly the same moment, several miles away, Federal Marshal Robert Hayes was already driving toward the airport after learning that the judge's travel status had not updated as scheduled. Hayes had escorted judges on official travel for years, and delays of this kind were uncommon enough to deserve immediate attention. Back inside the terminal, Marcus quietly observed the steady movement of travelers while waiting for Officer Brooks to receive updated information. A little girl walking beside her mother smiled at Marcus after noticing the small American flag pin attached to his lapel. Marcus smiled warmly in return, and the child waved before continuing toward another security lane. It was a simple human moment that contrasted sharply with the growing uncertainty surrounding the extended verification. Officer Brooks finally received a brief response through his communication device, instructing him to remain at the checkpoint while additional information was being reviewed. He acknowledged the message professionally without revealing its contents. Marcus simply folded his hands in front of him and waited with remarkable patience. Around them, airplanes continued arriving and departing on schedule, boarding announcements echoed across the terminal, and hundreds of travelers hurried toward destinations across the country. Yet hidden behind the ordinary rhythm of another busy airport morning, an invisible countdown had already begun, carrying everyone present toward a revelation that would soon transform an ordinary security review into a lesson remembered far beyond the walls of the terminal. Emily Carter reached the security checkpoint with the calm confidence of someone who had managed countless unexpected situations inside the airport. Yet she immediately sensed that this morning was different. She greeted Officer Daniel Brooks with a brief nod before quietly reviewing the information displayed on his handheld device. Brooks explained that he had initiated additional verification after noticing information that required clarification and that he was waiting for updated confirmation through official channels before allowing the traveler to continue. Emily appreciated his commitment to following procedure, but she also recognized that an unusual delay involving a traveler scheduled for government coordination deserved immediate attention. She turned toward Marcus Ellison with a professional smile and apologized for the inconvenience. Marcus returned the smile without hesitation. "I understand completely," he answered. "Important responsibilities deserve careful attention." His calm response surprised several nearby passengers who had expected frustration after such a lengthy wait. Instead of showing irritation, Marcus appeared almost more interested in reassuring the airport staff than in defending himself. Emily thanked him for his patience before stepping aside to contact airport operations directly. Within moments, another message appeared on her screen, this one marked with a higher priority than the earlier notifications. Airport operations reported that the traveler expected to meet a federal marshal after clearing security had still not been confirmed inside the secure area. Emily read the message twice before quietly asking Brooks, "Has this passenger identified himself as anyone connected with federal travel?" Brooks answered honestly, "No, ma'am. He has answered every question, but he has never mentioned holding any government position." Emily glanced toward Marcus again. He stood exactly where he had been asked to remain, holding his briefcase with relaxed posture while watching travelers pass through neighboring lanes. He neither interrupted the conversation nor attempted to influence it. His willingness to wait without complaint left a stronger impression than any credential could have. Nearby, the television crew filming travel footage adjusted its cameras toward another section of the terminal, unknowingly capturing wide shots that still included the security checkpoint in the background. Above them, surveillance cameras continued recording every movement from fixed positions that never blinked and never looked away. Across the terminal, airport operations initiated another call, this time directly to Federal Marshal Robert Hayes. When Hayes answered, he immediately confirmed that Judge Marcus Ellison had departed his hotel on schedule nearly an hour earlier and should already have completed screening. Without hesitation, Hayes informed airport operations that he was less than 10 minutes away from the airport and instructed them not to alter any ongoing procedures until he arrived. "Simply tell your personnel to continue documenting everything exactly as it happens," he said calmly. "I will handle the rest when I get there." Those words were quietly relayed to Emily Carter, who acknowledged the instruction without revealing its significance to anyone nearby. She simply advised Officer Brooks to continue following established procedures while awaiting additional confirmation. Brooks appreciated the guidance because it reinforced the very principle he believed in. Every decision should be supported by verified information rather than assumptions. Marcus listened respectfully as the officers exchanged updates, yet he remained completely silent unless someone addressed him directly. An elderly veteran standing several feet away observed the scene for a moment before walking toward Marcus. "I hope they get everything sorted out soon," the man said kindly. Marcus smiled and replied, "I believe they will. Good systems work best when everyone allows them to do their job." The veteran nodded with quiet admiration before continuing toward his gate. Emily noticed the exchange and found herself increasingly curious about the traveler standing before her. There was an unmistakable dignity in the way he carried himself, not because he expected special treatment, but because he treated every person around him with equal respect. As another boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, a dark government vehicle turned into the airport access road outside, carrying Federal Marshal Robert Hayes toward the entrance. Inside the terminal, no one at the checkpoint yet understood that the final pieces of the morning's puzzle were rapidly moving into place, while dozens of security cameras continued preserving every ordinary second that would soon become extraordinary when the complete truth finally stepped through the airport doors. Outside the terminal, Federal Marshal Robert Hayes watched the airport entrance grow larger through the windshield as his government vehicle moved steadily through the morning traffic. He had escorted federal judges for many years, and although unexpected delays occasionally happened, there was something unusual about the silence surrounding Judge Marcus Ellison's arrival. Normally, airport operations confirmed that a protected traveler had entered the secure area within minutes. This time, the confirmation had never come. Hayes calmly contacted airport operations once more. "Has Judge Ellison been located?" he asked. The answer remained the same. "Not yet, sir. We believe he is still at the main security checkpoint." Hayes thanked the coordinator and replied, "Please do not interrupt the officers. Let the process continue naturally. I want every step documented exactly as it occurred." Inside the terminal, Emily Carter quietly received the updated instruction. She understood immediately that the request was not about creating drama. It was about preserving accuracy. Every communication log, every camera angle, every recorded timestamp, and every routine procedure might soon become important. She looked toward the ceiling where dozens of security cameras continued their silent work. Unlike human memory, they would remember every detail exactly as it happened. At the checkpoint, Officer Daniel Brooks remained focused on completing every required verification. He reviewed another system response before requesting one final confirmation through airport communications. Marcus Ellison waited patiently beside the inspection table without shifting his composure. His briefcase remained open exactly where it had been placed, and every requested document had been presented without hesitation. Brooks noticed something he had rarely seen during extended screenings. Marcus never looked frustrated, never checked his watch, and never attempted to hurry the process. Instead, he observed the busy terminal with quiet curiosity, occasionally smiling at families passing toward their departure gates. A little boy pulling a bright blue suitcase looked up at Marcus and asked his father why that man had been waiting so long. Before the father could answer, Marcus simply smiled and said, "Sometimes important jobs require a little extra patience." The child smiled back before disappearing into the crowd. Nearby, several passengers who had been watching the situation began whispering among themselves. Some assumed there had been a paperwork issue. Others guessed the traveler might have forgotten identification. No one possessed enough information to understand the complete picture, and Marcus made no effort to correct anyone's assumptions. He believed explanations carried more weight when they came at the proper time rather than in the heat of uncertainty. Several floors above, airport operations received another notification generated automatically by the Travel Coordination System. The message indicated that the scheduled meeting between Judge Marcus Ellison and Federal Marshal Robert Hayes would begin in less than 20 minutes. If the judge did not clear security soon, the official itinerary would begin falling behind schedule. Emily Carter studied the alert before quietly informing Officer Brooks that a representative connected with the traveler was now on the way to the checkpoint. Brooks acknowledged the update professionally. "Until they arrive, I will continue following procedure," he replied. Emily nodded in agreement. She appreciated that he remained committed to consistency rather than rushing because someone important might be involved. At that very moment, Robert Hayes entered the terminal through a secure employee entrance accompanied by a single airport liaison. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he walked with measured confidence while reviewing the travel file one final time. Around him, travelers continued checking departure boards, ordering breakfast, and boarding flights without realizing that one routine security review was about to become the subject of countless conversations inside the airport. Back at the checkpoint, Marcus folded his boarding pass neatly and placed it beside his identification while waiting for the final response. Officer Brooks received one last message asking him to remain exactly where he was until an authorized federal representative arrived in person. Brooks looked briefly toward the terminal entrance before returning his attention to Marcus. Neither man spoke for several seconds. The sounds of rolling luggage, boarding announcements, and distant aircraft filled the silence. Hidden above them, every camera continued recording with perfect clarity, preserving the final moments before the truth would arrive not through opinion, assumption, or argument, but through official confirmation that no one present could question. Federal Marshal Robert Hayes entered the main terminal with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent an entire career allowing professionalism to speak louder than authority. He moved quickly but never appeared rushed, acknowledging airport personnel with courteous nods as Emily Carter walked toward him from the security office. Without exchanging unnecessary words, she pointed discreetly toward the checkpoint where Marcus Ellison still stood patiently beside the inspection table. Hayes followed her gaze and immediately recognized the familiar figure waiting exactly where he had been asked to remain. Before approaching, Hayes asked one simple question. "Has everyone acted according to established procedure?" Emily answered honestly. "Yes, every step has been documented, and every communication has been recorded." Hayes gave a small nod of approval. "Good. That is exactly how it should be." Together, they walked toward the checkpoint, while Officer Daniel Brooks continued reviewing the latest communication on his handheld device. Brooks looked up as the two officials approached and immediately recognized the credentials displayed by the federal marshal. Remaining professional, he greeted Hayes and explained that additional verification had been requested because of information requiring clarification. Hayes listened carefully without interrupting a single sentence. When Brooks finished, Hayes replied calmly, Thank you for following your responsibilities, officer. May I speak with the traveler for a moment? Brooks stepped aside without hesitation. Hayes walked directly toward Marcus, and the expression on his face changed from official concentration to genuine respect. Extending his hand, he smiled warmly and said in a clear voice that carried across the quiet checkpoint, "Good morning, Judge Ellison. I apologize for the unexpected delay. We have been looking for you." For several seconds, the sounds of the terminal seemed to fade into silence. Nearby passengers stopped walking. Conversations ended in mid-sentence. Even the television crew filming general airport footage instinctively turned one camera toward the unexpected greeting. Officer Brooks remained completely still as the words settled into the reality before him. Judge Ellison accepted the handshake with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the morning. "Good morning, Marshal Hayes," he replied. "The officers have been performing their duties. I appreciate everyone taking the time to complete the process correctly." There was no frustration in his voice, no attempt to embarrass anyone, and no hint of resentment. His first response was not to discuss himself, but to acknowledge the importance of procedure. Hayes smiled with quiet admiration. "That is exactly what I expected you would say, Your Honor." Emily Carter glanced toward Officer Brooks, who was now reviewing every moment of the conversation in his own mind. The traveler who had patiently answered every question, opened every compartment of his briefcase, and waited without complaint was not simply another passenger. He was a respected federal judge traveling on official judicial business, and he had never once attempted to use his position to influence the outcome of an ordinary security review. Hayes then turned toward Brooks with the same respectful professionalism he had shown everyone else. "Officer Brooks," he said, "Judge Ellison specifically prefers to travel without announcing his position whenever possible. He believes every public servant should experience the same procedures as every other citizen. That is one reason so many people hold him in such high regard." Brooks listened quietly, feeling the full weight of those words. He realized that the man standing before him had possessed every opportunity to identify himself immediately, yet had chosen instead to trust the integrity of the process. Above them, the airport surveillance cameras continued recording every handshake, every expression, and every spoken word exactly as they occurred. Airport operations simultaneously updated the travel coordination system, confirming that Judge Marcus Ellison had officially entered the secure departure area. Across multiple offices, notification screens changed from pending to confirmed. What had begun as an extended security verification was now becoming a carefully documented example of why professionalism, patience, and objective evidence mattered. Judge Ellison calmly gathered his documents, closed his worn leather briefcase, and thanked Officer Brooks for his time before preparing to continue toward his departure gate. Brooks met the judge's eyes for a brief moment and offered a sincere nod of respect. In that quiet exchange, no lengthy explanation was necessary. The cameras had preserved every detail, the official records had confirmed every fact, and the truth had revealed itself with a dignity that no assumption could ever overcome. As Judge Marcus Ellison and Federal Marshal Robert Hayes began walking toward the departure gates, the activity inside the terminal slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. Yet the quiet conversation that had unfolded at the checkpoint continued echoing in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Travelers resumed pulling rolling suitcases across polished floors, boarding announcements continued overhead, and families hurried toward departing flights. But Officer Daniel Brooks remained standing beside the inspection area for several thoughtful moments before returning to his duties. Emily Carter approached him with a calm expression and placed a reassuring hand lightly on the counter beside his workstation. "The documentation team will preserve everything exactly as it happened," she said. Brooks nodded slowly. "I understand." There was no defensiveness in his voice, only reflection. He replayed each question he had asked, each response Judge Ellison had given, and each opportunity the judge had quietly declined to identify himself by title. Brooks realized that throughout the entire interaction, Marcus Ellison had never once suggested that his position should place him above ordinary airport procedures. Instead, he had demonstrated confidence in the process itself. That realization lingered longer than any official instruction ever could. Meanwhile, Robert Hayes and Judge Ellison continued through the secure concourse, walking at an unhurried pace toward their scheduled departure gate. Hayes apologized once again for the unexpected delay, but Judge Ellison simply smiled. Every institution becomes stronger when people perform their responsibilities with honesty, he said. The important question is never whether mistakes happen. It is whether we learn from them. Hayes had worked alongside judges from every part of the federal judiciary, yet he had always admired Marcus Ellison for that very reason. The judge rarely spoke about authority. Instead, he spoke about responsibility. At airport operations, staff members gathered the complete record of the morning's events. Security camera footage from multiple angles was archived according to standard procedure. Communication logs were preserved with precise timestamps. Radio transmissions, checkpoint records, and access reports were collected into a single review file so that supervisors could examine the entire sequence objectively. No one discussed opinions. No one relied upon assumptions. The evidence would simply present the complete story exactly as it had unfolded. Emily Carter personally reviewed the timeline and noticed something that impressed her deeply. From the moment Judge Ellison entered the terminal until he finally proceeded toward his gate, every interaction reflected courtesy on his part, regardless of the delay. Even during the longest moments of uncertainty, he had remained patient with employees who were simply carrying out their responsibilities. Several airport workers quietly shared similar observations. The cashier from the coffee stand remembered his kindness after the register mistake earlier that morning. The young family he had guided through the terminal mentioned how generously he had helped them without expecting recognition. Even the elderly veteran who had briefly spoken with him at the checkpoint later told an airport employee, "You can learn a great deal about a person's character by watching how they behave when nobody knows who they are." Those simple words spread quietly among the staff during the afternoon. Officer Brooks completed the remainder of his shift with the same professionalism he had always tried to demonstrate, but his perspective had changed. He understood more clearly than ever that every traveler carried a story invisible to the people around them. Uniforms, titles, and official positions could eventually become known, but character revealed itself long before identification documents ever did. Before boarding began, Judge Ellison paused beside a large window overlooking the runway where aircraft prepared for departure beneath the bright morning sky. For a brief moment, he watched ground crews perform their carefully coordinated work, appreciating how every successful operation depended upon trust, communication, and accountability. Hayes joined him quietly, and together they walked toward the aircraft without another word. Behind them, inside the airport, the official review had already begun, guided not by speculation or emotion, but by clear evidence recorded from every angle. The cameras had preserved the facts, the records had preserved the timeline, and the dignity shown throughout the morning had preserved something even more valuable, reminding everyone involved that fairness is measured not by how people treat those whose authority they recognize, but by how they treat those whose story they have not yet had the chance to understand. 3 weeks after the events at the airport, the official review reached its conclusion through the same careful process that had guided every step from the beginning. Supervisors examined the complete security camera recordings, communication logs, checkpoint documentation, and witness statements in chronological order. The purpose was never to search for someone to blame, but to determine exactly what had happened, why it had happened, and what could be improved to strengthen public confidence. Every minute captured by the surveillance system confirmed the same essential facts. Officer Daniel Brooks had followed established security procedures, but the review also showed several moments when clearer communication and earlier coordination between airport operations and federal travel liaisons could have prevented the unnecessary delay. Emily Carter participated in the final briefing with representatives from airport leadership, transportation security officials, and training supervisors. Rather than treating the incident as an isolated mistake, they recognized it as an opportunity to improve procedures across the entire airport. New coordination guidelines were developed to ensure that official travel notifications reached checkpoint supervisors more efficiently while still preserving equal treatment for every traveler. The review emphasized a principle that everyone around the conference table supported without hesitation. Every passenger deserved professionalism, courtesy, and fairness regardless of appearance, occupation, or background. Those values strengthened security instead of weakening it. Officer Brooks accepted the findings with humility. He never attempted to avoid responsibility for the decisions he had made, nor did he criticize anyone else involved. During a follow-up meeting with his supervisors, he admitted that the experience had changed the way he thought about first impressions. "Every traveler arrives carrying a story that I cannot see," he said quietly. "My responsibility is not only to enforce procedures, but also to remember that respect costs nothing and benefits everyone." His supervisor appreciated the honesty because genuine growth always begins with honest reflection. The airport later incorporated portions of the surveillance footage into internal training materials, not because anyone wished to embarrass those involved, but because the recording demonstrated the importance of patience, communication, and professional conduct under pressure. New officers watched the sequence from beginning to end and discussed how objective evidence often revealed details that emotions overlooked in the moment. Emily Carter reminded every training class that surveillance cameras protected both the public and airport personnel by preserving facts exactly as they occurred. Meanwhile, Judge Marcus Ellison never contacted the airport to demand disciplinary action or public recognition. When airport leadership offered a formal opportunity to discuss the incident, he accepted the invitation with characteristic humility. Sitting across the conference table from administrators and supervisors, he thanked them for conducting a transparent review before offering one simple observation. "Public trust grows when institutions are willing to examine themselves honestly," he said. "Perfection is impossible, but accountability is always within reach." His words left a lasting impression on everyone present. No dramatic speeches followed. No accusations filled the room. Instead, there was a shared understanding that the strongest organizations become stronger still when they choose learning over defensiveness. Several weeks later, Officer Brooks requested permission to attend one of the airport's advanced professional development seminars on communication and public service. He listened carefully as instructors discussed unconscious assumptions, respectful interactions, and the importance of allowing verified facts to guide every decision. The lessons resonated deeply because they were no longer theoretical. They were connected to an experience he would remember throughout his career. As spring gradually gave way to summer, the airport continued welcoming millions of travelers from every corner of the country and around the world. Families hurried toward vacations, service members returned home, business leaders caught early flights, and ordinary citizens passed through the same checkpoint where one quiet morning had transformed into an unforgettable lesson about dignity. Above them, the same security cameras continued recording without preference, without prejudice, and without emotion, preserving every ordinary moment with equal honesty. Long after the official review had been archived, the greatest outcome was not found inside any report or policy update. It lived in the daily choices of the people who had learned that fairness is strongest when it is offered before anyone knows a person's title, and respect has its greatest value when it is given freely to every individual who walks through the same door. 6 months later, Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport looked exactly as it always had, filled with the steady rhythm of departures, reunions, and ordinary moments that quietly shaped thousands of lives every single day. Travelers hurried beneath departure boards, children laughed while pulling colorful suitcases, and aircraft lifted into bright blue skies with remarkable precision. Most people passing through the terminal had no idea that one routine morning months earlier had inspired meaningful improvements in the way airport personnel communicated, coordinated, and served the public. Those changes had become part of everyday operations, so natural that new employees assumed the procedures had always existed. Officer Daniel Brooks still reported for duty before sunrise, checked his equipment with the same discipline, and greeted travelers with the same professional commitment. Yet there was one noticeable difference that everyone working beside him quietly recognized. He had become more deliberate in every conversation, more attentive when listening before speaking, and more determined to ensure that every traveler felt respected throughout the screening process. Younger officers often asked why he seemed so patient even during the busiest travel periods. Brooks would simply answer, "The first thing you notice about someone is rarely the most important thing about them." He never mentioned names or personal details from the incident that had transformed his perspective. The lesson itself mattered far more than the story behind it. Across the city, Judge Marcus Ellison continued serving on the federal bench with the same humility that had defined his entire career. Courtrooms remained places where every individual deserved to be heard with fairness, regardless of background, profession, or appearance. Colleagues often admired his ability to remain calm during the most difficult proceedings, but very few knew about the unexpected morning at the airport. Marcus had never spoken publicly about it because he believed that genuine institutional improvement deserved more attention than personal recognition. One autumn afternoon, airport leadership invited several public officials to observe a new professional development program highlighting communication, accountability, and public trust. Marcus accepted the invitation quietly. As he entered the training room, several instructors welcomed him warmly, while Officer Daniel Brooks, who had been asked to share his own experience with new recruits, looked up from the front of the classroom. For a brief moment, the room became completely silent. Brooks walked forward with sincere respect and extended his hand. "Judge Ellison," he said, "I have wanted to thank you for something that happened long after that morning ended. Your patience gave me the opportunity to become a better public servant." Marcus accepted the handshake with the same gentle smile that had never changed. "Officer Brooks," he replied, "character is revealed most clearly by what we choose to do after we learn something important. You chose to grow. That deserves respect." The new officers listened carefully because they understood they were witnessing something more valuable than a lecture. They were watching two public servants demonstrate that accountability and dignity could exist together without bitterness, resentment, or pride. After the session ended, Brooks walked Judge Ellison toward the terminal entrance where sunlight poured through the massive glass walls overlooking the runways. Airplanes continued arriving and departing, carrying strangers whose stories remained unknown to everyone around them. Marcus paused for a moment before preparing to leave. "Every person who walks through these doors hopes to be treated fairly," he said quietly. "The remarkable thing is that fairness never requires us to know who they are first." Brooks nodded thoughtfully as those words settled into his memory. Judge Ellison then continued toward the waiting vehicle that would take him to another day of public service, while Brooks returned to the terminal where another line of travelers had already begun forming at the checkpoint. Above them, the familiar security cameras continued recording each ordinary moment without preference or assumption, preserving facts exactly as they unfolded. They would never celebrate heroes or condemn mistakes. They would simply protect the truth until people were willing to see it. And perhaps that was the quiet lesson hidden inside every act of genuine justice. Because titles may command attention, uniforms may represent authority, and cameras may preserve evidence. But in the end, it is character that reveals who we truly are when nobody else yet knows our name.